Welcome. Thank you so much for joining us today. I'm Melissa Tallman, the Community Curator here at Innovare Advancement Center. I would like to welcome you to our Armchair discussion, part of our Innovare Elevation series. It's our communication platform here at Griffith Institute that bridges individuals from the government world, academic world, industry world together to be able to collaborate on the same topic within the tech sector, primarily in cyber, quantum, UAS, artificial intelligence, and machine learning. Today, I'm very fortunate to go ahead and have our guest, Colonel Benjamin Alvin Drew, who's gracious enough to be here with us today. He's visiting us on a little bit of a duty. He's working with our ACE program, Advanced Course in Engineering, to work on a challenge problem for their capstone as they embark on a 10-week journey here with us at Griffith Institute. He also did a nice briefing for our Viceroy program, cyber and electromagnetic spectrum. So he was kind enough to go ahead and spend the next 30 minutes with us. It's just a casual conversation, and it's not often that we get to have a real-life astronaut in our presence. And I was telling Alvin earlier too, he really notched up my cool mom level. My 10 and 13-year-old, it's not often that I am now cool in their eyes. And today they were giddy as anything, going, I can't believe you get to actually sit next to an astronaut. I can't believe it either. Today was really a special day for me. So welcome and thank you for joining us. Your career is something to be admired by. So as I was doing a little bit of a background check on you and checking your bio, the one thing that fascinated me was, one, you did 2 spacewalks. You were a mission specialist for NASA in 2000. You were accomplished personnel within the Air Force. You still have accomplishments, but this was always a childhood dream. This wasn't something that you just woke up one day and had a change of careers. Did it live up to everything that you thought it was going to be when you manifested that when you were a child? How old were you?
I was 4.5 when I decided I wanted to fly for a living. And I think I was all of 5.5 when I decided I wanted to go fly in space. So it's like, that's always, it's a little bit terrifying to think that a first grader made my career decisions for me.
Was it a mentor or having a speaker come in? Like, what got you interested in flying in space and really pursuing your dream?
I was just watching it. I think that my first time I was, my father was going on a business trip out of Baltimore, Washington International Airport. And I'm old enough that they had observation decks back then. There was no security. You just walked up to the gate. And me being an energetic 4-year-old, they plunked me down at the observation deck and just left me out there to go burn my energy. And I'm watching these airplanes take off going, I got to do that. How do I do that? And so long talk with my mother and my grandmother on the ride back about this job called being a pilot, where you get to fly these airplanes that pop wheelies and come completely off the ground and fly up into the sky. And then about a year later, I'm in class. At that point, I was just suffering through arithmetic, which I didn't care for very much at the time. When the principal comes in, stops the class, which was a good sign, pulls out a TV set that's getting even better, and turns it on. So we're watching TV instead of doing arithmetic. I really like this. There was some guy counting backwards from 10 with this big smoldering rocket on the screen, and I had no idea what a rocket was or what it was going to do until it launched. And I watched this thing just take off and do the same thing with these airplanes. It just goes off and up into the sky. And I'm like, what in the world was that? And she was explaining that was Apollo 7. We've got this mission that we're going to the moon. And this time I'm halfway through first grade. I know a thing or two. And I told her, this is crazy. They're never going to get there. The moon's all the way up in the sky and they can't get there. She goes, there's folks from agencies called NASA. They're working on it. I would keep an eye on them. So I kept an eye on them. And about 9 months later, they're on the moon. And I asked my dad, okay, I want to be a pilot, but I want to also have a job that pays enough that I can go do this. And he goes, these guys are being paid to be on the moon right now. And I just couldn't believe that they were being paid to be on the surface of the moon. There's this job called being an astronaut. And I said, well, should I be an astronaut or should I be a pilot now? I want to do both. He goes, most of these guys have been test pilots, so you can go do both these things. So we had a discussion about getting good grades and staying out of trouble and not talking back to your parents.
How'd that work out for you?
Well, I asked him if we could do 2 out of 3 of those.
Very, very cool. So you weren't into math at the time, but in order to be able to do the flights that you did, you had to have some sort of mathematician background in order to be able to do calculations or rely on a really good team. How easy or difficult was it for the road in the STEM program?
So, one, when I had a different attitude about math, not arithmetic, by the time I got done, I'm now trained to be a NASA astronaut, so I need to know this, but I was still just suffering through it stoically. It wasn't until I was in 7th grade that I found that you could do things with math. They were doing word problems with us, and there were problems that you could solve, some of which were interesting, like just going out and doing a rendezvous or something like that, and it all required math. Suddenly math was a tool. This wasn't a bunch of just strange symbols from odd places out there. That it was something I could go and apply. And then I went to being the opposite side of being a teacher. You couldn't teach me enough math fast enough. I was being a pain in their neck about learning it.
Okay. You're an Air Force liaison, right? Can you tell us a little bit about the ranks that you took place when you were in the Air Force, of how it got you to the step that you are today?
Okay, so it's definitely not the straight line path to becoming an NASA astronaut, so I'm not putting out my career path as a recommended way to go do that. Better be lucky than good sometimes, but went and joined the Air Force Academy mainly because they were one of the very few institutions that had a dedicated, not just aerospace, but either aeronautics or astronautics degree as an undergraduate. Although the colleges were saying, well, you can do 7 semesters of mechanical engineering, and then we'll give you a semester of aerospace. And I didn't want to go design refrigerator compressors and things like that. I wanted to go work on aircraft design. So at the end of it, I might actually get to go fly airplanes too. And that was certainly a big draw. And so I went out there to applied to and got into the Air Force Academy. And that, sure enough, it was everything I'd hoped. There was an astronautics degree program which I pursued. I was also wanting to go pursue the physics program out there, so I did both those because I'm a glutton for punishment. And it was there that they kind of turned on that whole thing about the astronaut program, because I'm 17, a little bit more realistic about how hard that was going to go be. And I had gotten in, I'd had a year of college before I'd gotten in, so I decided I didn't want to go suffer through all of physics again, because those are tough courses. And so I said, hey, can I test out of physics? And they were pretty proud of their physics programs. They said, well, we'll give you the final exams, but if you pass them, we'll give you credit. So I wound up testing out of all 4 semesters of core physics. And that's when I got summoned to see the dean. He said, have you thought about being a physics major? I said, I took those tests so I could get out of doing physics. He goes, no, and one guy turned to me and says, well, think about that. If you have a technical degree like physics and you're a halfway decent pilot, you could become a test pilot. And who knows, all of our astronauts to date from the Air Force have been test pilots. And I was gullible enough to just sign on the dotted line and become a physics major, which was a good decision. I enjoyed physics. But I went back and found that professor later and said, you told me this and I believed you. He goes, what happened to you? I'm an astronaut now. It's your fault.
What was the hardest part as you progressed throughout your career becoming an astronaut? Looking back at things now, what do you feel was the hardest part?
The toughest part was always taking that first step into the next phase, the gut check, because you have to leave that comfort zone. So here I am, I'm an officer in the Air Force now, and I've got to go to pilot training, and I have no idea if I have any skills as a pilot. So what if I go out here and I'm embarrassingly bad at this and I don't get any better? Well, that dream was derailed, and that was tough. And so now I'm going to go fly combat aircraft, and I'm going to know, do I have what it takes to go out there and fly under that kind of stress, and those types of things out there. Okay, now I'm going to go off and go to test pilot school. I was flying helicopters, and I got to go fly jets. Well, what if I can't handle jets? What if I can't handle Navy test pilot school? What if I go out here and I'm not good at being a test pilot, or this is dangerous stuff? So every time you do that, there's another opportunity where to find out that you're not good at something, that you don't have any indication whether or not you were any good at it in the first place. So there's always that fear of failure as I took that first step. Now, once I was underway, it was just a focus. I had this getting from one day to the next, doing the next task. But it was always kind of that break where I had that lucid moment to go look, where you had this brief moments of terror.
Do you do a mantra or say anything to yourself when those what-if moments come, of that fearfulness of, what makes you go through that push other than that childhood dream of having that come to fruition? Is there a mantra that you have on a
There's a
daily
few
basis?
real deep breaths. And then that sense of I would rather fail trying than to not have tried at all. And that would be the biggest failure. So get out there and just give it your best shot. And that was kind of the contract I had with my parents in school, was that if the best you can do, if I see you working hard and giving your best and you've got a C or a D, that's better for me than if you got a B loafing when you could have gotten an A. Give it your A effort all the time when you do these things, and then you accept what comes of it.
I love it. I love it. I asked, there was a local elementary school, New York Mills Elementary, that was just finishing up studying the solar system and doing some science projects. So I reached out to them on Monday and asked if they would provide some questions. 74 questions came in. Every single child wanted to go ahead and ask you. I'm not going to ask you 74 questions by any means, but there was some really good ones in there. And one of them that really struck me, speaking to a whole new era of a new generation, that next generation coming up that we're trying to develop within that STEM talent program. The question is going up into space and moving the robots and doing the spacewalk, is it similar to playing video games?
Yes and no. In a lot of ways, I was just having a conversation about how I'd done a lot of virtual reality training before going into space, and things that I thought would have been just a little bit novel to me when I got there in space suddenly did not feel visually like I had done these things before, because the video, this virtual reality video, was realistic enough that I'd had the experience before just virtually, and it was close enough to the real thing. Knowing that sometimes I never had that sense of, if I get this wrong in a video game or virtual, that this could either kill me or cause billions of dollars of damage or wreck somebody's life's work. And there's always that little bit of anxiety that doesn't accompany. I don't have when I'm doing video games or doing many video simulations.
Okay. Yeah. You went into space twice, once in 2007, and then the last time was in 2011. Were they similar? Similar experiences, feelings?
They were different. I was explaining this group, in fact, that it's like watching a movie that's really rich in its plot 2 times, and you see very different things the second time you go through the plot because you're too busy focused on, how's this going to turn out? You're following the main plot line. The second time you're noticing the cinematography, something going on in the background, a subplot, or just something else, some foreshadowing thing that you missed the first time because you're too busy riveted on the main thing out there. It was the same thing going up 2 times in space. The missions were very similar, different crews, but also all these novel things out there, going, the ascent, the violence of that climb into space, just the breathtaking beauty of looking out the window. I wouldn't say I ever got used to it, but it wasn't just a complete, just mind-blowing, unexpected experience. The second time I went up there, I knew to expect that, so I was looking for other things out there. So they were both rich and both very different experiences.
Very, very nice. Do you expect that you'd want to go back if given the opportunity?
I love to go back, but I really felt like I go to different schools all the time, and I try and encourage kids to do the thing my parents told me to do, was get good grades and try not to talk back to your parents or something. And it seems like it would be a shame if I held them up in line while I'm out there getting my 8th or 9th spaceflight experience. I would rather be paving a path for them at this point in my career. I had my chance to go do that because other people out there laid a path. I didn't get to invent a shuttle or a station and then go fly it. Some other people did that, and I got to reap the benefit. And I feel like I need to pay some of that forward. So I would love to go do it, but I think I would be racked with guilt because I'm depriving somebody else of that opportunity at this point.
Yeah. Have you ever told your principal? Have you gone back and talked to your principal that rolled in that cart and showcased Apollo?
So I was on an NPR program where I was talking about this and this principal, and in fact, other things she did to encourage me. And one of my fellow classmates heard that and ratted me out to my principal. I was sure that she was pretty old, so I was very sure she was not dead. She was retired in a convent in New Jersey. And I got summoned to the convent house to go see the principal. It's like something out of that, what was it, the Blues Brothers. So basically, just to go catch up with her, and the rest of a lot of my teachers from school were all up there too in retirement. So I got to go hang out. I felt like kind of the ultimate teacher's pet. I'm out there saying nice things about my instructors years after.
Very, very nice. We'll open the floor up to a couple other questions here too. so that I don't take up all of the time here because this is a really rare opportunity. So I have you start with yourself. Please state your name and then your question. I think we've got a mic coming around too so that we can pick that up.
So, my name is Jamie Vasquez Madera. I'm from the Inter-American University of Puerto Rico Bayamon campus. And I do have one question that I think I may speak for a majority of the undergraduate students. And that question is as follows. From what you learned throughout the years up to your first ever visit to space, how different was the theoretical aspect of your career compared to what you saw working in space?
How was it different being in space from what I'd seen just going through my career? I had gotten lots of good habits and traits that that carried me through when I first went into space that applied, which was good because nothing really prepared me for being in space. Just the emotional response. And it was the same way going into combat the first one, but on a very different end of the spectrum. One was terror, the other one was just awe, where you're sitting there going, oh my goodness, but your body is doing the things it needs to be doing, the right processes. There's just nothing that really, they can show you pictures and people can describe it for you, but when you're up there the first time and you're immersed in that whole scenery out there, it's just breathtaking. Just literally breathtaking to be up there doing that. And so it's trying to, I don't know what you can do to prepare for that. I'm kind of glad I didn't. It wasn't, because it was just a new thing. I didn't. That's when I thought I'd seen it all. I had not. Yeah.
Real quick, I'm curious, what are your thoughts on having these general population space flights up for a short duration and then returning as they just did last year?
I think it's a great thing. One of the things I noticed when I was in space was that our people who made our maps did a great job of it. The Earth does look like the globes, but with one very profound difference is the political boundaries really don't exist. So I had this thought thing, if aliens came here from another planet and says, how come you people in this town have this type of currency, you speak this language, you believe these things, these people 15 miles away from you have different currency, different language, and in different beliefs, and you sometimes fight about that. Well, there's just boundary between us. I go, can you show it to us? And you pull out a map going, that's a picture of your planet. Where's the actual boundary?
Interesting.
And they go, it's really in your head. You guys have all had this mass delusion that you agree to, that you're going to have these artificial lines between you that don't really exist. And that I haven't been able to really unthink that piece. And I think the more people who go up there and see that, have that epiphany that a lot of the things we see are just, they're conventions that we have agreed to, we've made up. It might help you to negotiate your way around them.
There's a bigger picture of life.
Yeah.
Hi, my name is Michael Ortizo. I'm part of the Innovation Law Center with Syracuse University College of Law. And I guess my question to you is, do you ever worry about space debris and its implications with, the limiting factors of, traveling and traversing space outside of, the Earth's atmosphere?
Okay, so space debris is something I thought about a lot. Probably turns out the worst place in the world for space debris is low Earth orbit, where the International Space Station is. One of the former NASA program managers for the space station described the front of the space station as looking like a Texas road sign, from all just the pock marks from all the debris that have hit the space station over the years. When you're out there in a little thin spacesuit between you and the universe, and these things are traveling at more than 10 times the speed of a bullet, and will shred through anything out there that you could possibly be wearing. You think about space debris a lot when you're doing that piece out there. It's also just not just a personal threat to me. It's a threat to all of our ability to work in space in low Earth orbit, which turns out to be one of the most useful places for us to put satellites, which is why there's so much debris up there. And so, in my current job, I get to think a lot of it because I don't get a choice. We're working on policies, White House level policies, to not just stop creating debris, but to make things that survive impact with debris, because that's where most debris comes from, is things being hit by other pieces of debris, and also to take things out of orbit that are sources of debris. We have old rocket bodies, dead satellites, things like that that tend to break up. It turns out that debris you can see is not even the tip of the iceberg. It's less than 1/10 of 1% of the things out there that can hurt you. So the things that really do scare me are things that are the size of rice grains, because we can't track them on radar. We have no way of seeing them until they show up and hit something the size of a freight car. We can see it and avoid it. although sooner or later that freight car breaks up into little rice-sized pellets of debris, so might as well pull it out of orbit and back into an ocean or something before it does that. We're working on trying to put in the foundation, the footwork to allow us to go do that, to make it so that industries and other people out there can make a market of getting debris out of Earth orbit, and just not just waiting for the atmosphere to clean it out naturally, because that can be a very long time.
Hello, sir. It's an honor to meet you. My name is Abdul. I'm with the Hustle Accelerator here at the GI. Retired physicist, now practicing data scientist. I wanted to ask you two questions. I know it's cheating, but I wanted to ask one, like what kind of soft skills, besides communication, do you think were really important throughout your candidacy program and for you to act as an astronaut? And my second question, you kind of touched on this a little bit, is what kind of existential questions were you able to answer for yourself once you got up in the International Space Station?
Take the easy one, the soft skills first there. So one of the things that was enforced upon us, I think they realized by decades of experience with astronauts before I got there, was that you're locking up a bunch of people in a tin can with each other, and there's no timeout space. So you got to get really good at conflict management. It's not conflict avoidance, conflict management. Because you've got some very strong personalities and very driven people out there who are not going to see things eye to eye. So how do you handle that particular piece? How do you work on things like just keeping your mental state when you're not going to go for a walk? There's things out there where you kind of do that piece. So they did a lot of just helping us with that particular training. So we do that. I didn't think much of it until a few of our astronauts went down to Antarctica to look for asteroids, and they were on the ice out there, and they were with people who had not gone through that kind of training, and they saw kind of the real dysfunction that could happen out there in those things, where they're going, well, why didn't you just? And they realized these guys had not been through any kind of training like that. We got to train. We got to train it. We also got to practice it. They would throw me out in the middle of the northern part of Canada in the middle of winter. They'd stick me out in the northern Pacific, on a kayak, with killer whales and things around. So you've got to go do these things with other people out there where there's real stresses that would drive conflict to make you go practice these skills before I got there. And so they were internalized by the time I got to space. And they, best I can tell you, seemed to work. I don't remember any fist fights while I was there on the World Space Station. The existential one, I think it was less answers, more questions out of that whole thing. There's a part where you know things cerebrally, but you don't think about them in a visceral manner. I was telling these guys, you're up in orbit, 250 miles that direction is the Earth, and you look really insignificant compared to the Earth. 13.5 billion light years out this way is all the rest of the universe, and the Earth looks like a really tiny dot compared to it. The other one was that you look at the Earth from there, even up close, where it's not the little blue marble Earth, it's big blue beach ball Earth pressed against your nose from 250 miles up. Is the limb of the atmosphere that you can see at sunrises and sunsets. And it's not like an eggshell, it's like that little membrane that's inside of an eggshell compared to this 8,000 mile diameter piece of rock. It's nickel and iron, and it looks incredibly thin and wispy. This is thin protection from the murderous forces of the universe that are out there. And everybody is in that little wispy envelope of air around the planet. All of our history, everything that's, every McDonald's, every Starbucks is in that little envelope of air. And it just feels like such an insignificant portion of the planet for where we are all out there. And to think that there's billions of us out there living in that together. And there's been generations, for millions of years that have been doing this as well. It really gives you a sense of how infinitesimally finite you are in time, how infinitesimally finite you are in space. There's a much greater, bigger thing out there that's connected, and you're just a small part of it. And it's not really terrifying, but you do feel like you're connected. You feel like you're part of something greater. And I carried that back with me. But it did not answer any questions. I didn't come back any smarter. You bet.
Is there any long-term effects after going into space?
Any long-term effects? You see like 7'4", and no. They've done lots of studies. Like the one thing that does, they've seen that you can isolate to being an astronaut in space is that we have a higher rate of getting glaucoma. And I think that's from the amount of radiation that we get that hits the lenses of our eyes. And so it's not like a huge jump, but it's something that definitely has a difference for being in space. The other part they noticed the difference in astronauts and the rest of the population is that we tend to die accidental deaths at higher rates than other people out there. It has nothing to do with being in space. It's the type of people who would go into space to begin with. Space isn't the only stupid thing that we do in life. So, yeah.
Do you have a favorite planet other than Earth?
Okay, I'll tell you, my
Other
favorite
than
planet
Earth.
was Mars until I went up into space, and then my favorite planet was Earth after that. I think once you look at Earth from the outside in, it's a very different planet.
Okay.
But I would say Mars because I had this ultimate fantasy of skiing on the polar ice caps of Mars out there. That would be a cool thing to go do.
Do you think that you'll ever see or the next generation will ever see any type of life on Mars, of trying to inhabit that?
I think we'll get out to Mars during my lifetime. I think that's doable. I was telling these folks that the breakthroughs we're having in propulsion technology, specifically nuclear propulsion technology, that is much more efficient than our chemical engines. We can get to Mars. Right now, our Mars mission using our current technology is 3.5 years to get there and back. A lot of that is time spent on Mars waiting for the planets literally to line up again so you can make a transfer back. If you have a more efficient engine and you don't have to go take out, right now we take 1,000 pounds of fuel for every pound of everything that's not fuel to get to a Mars and back. So every pound of you, every pound of spacecraft, every pound of everything out there. And so if you can get that down to now with nuclear, you can get that down to maybe 10 pounds of fuel for every pound of you. That's a huge jump in terms of efficiency. Mm-hmm. And now Mars becomes something that's reachable in days, like maybe 1 or 2 months with that new technology. And that's not 22nd century technology, that's 21st century technology that's out there within reach right now. Probably a 10 to 25 year concerted effort to get there, like we went from going supersonically getting to the moon in about that amount of time. We could do that exact same thing. And once that happens, the solar system becomes our backyard. You can go figure out which planet or moon is your favorite by going and visiting it.
Interesting. We'll get another one, Kelly.
Yeah, I'm John Hu. I'm a visiting faculty here at the Griffith Institute. So my question for you is that what is the scariest moment that you had in the space and how did you overcome it? Yeah.
Okay, so most of the scariest moment of going in space is going into space altogether. You've got this thundering rocket with a whole lot of violent energy behind it, and you really do hope that the people who put those equations together got the math exactly right, because even 1/10 of 1% of 6.5 million pounds is a whole lot of thrust going in the wrong direction that can do bad things to you. One story to relate was I was on my last mission, so it wasn't like I was going to damage my career ambitions by doing something that was out of turn. And one guy said, we got this couple of big moon roofs over top the space shuttle, and you're laying on your back, so I'm up close to the roof. He says, if you take this 5x8 mirror that's down there, if you look at switches and hold it up there, you can see back down the spine of the shuttle while it's lifting off. I'm supposed to be monitoring my console for different telemetry to make sure everything's going right. So I'm going to see what that is. And I'm watching these engines light up, and things are coming out of that flame trench that are as big as tractor trailers, and they're being tossed out like toys. It was an extraordinarily violent thing, like a massive explosion. And I took the mirror down, I put it under my leg, and I focused back on my console and watched the data after that. I really didn't want to think about that level of violence.
Any other questions?
I'm Andrew. I'm a PhD student in computer science at Harvard. And you mentioned that a lot of astronauts die accidental deaths. I was curious if you had some activity or hobby that was something like that, a dangerous activity or something like that.
Yeah, I'd like to say I have more sense of that in my old age. I'm pushing 60 now, but one thing I discovered in my first job after I left Colorado, Texas was in Colorado, and I took up snowboarding. Now, snowboarding is stupid enough as it is because anybody who's ever done it. But I decided in the off season to keep my skills up, I would get a skateboard, not just any skateboard, a skateboard called a freeboard because it can drift like a snowboard can. Now, the difference between the skateboard and the snowboard is when you fall off that thing, you're not falling into 15 inches of packed powder, you're falling onto asphalt and cement. And it took me a few years to figure out, boy, this is a really dumb thing to do, but it sure was fun while I was doing it, yeah. And so I usually drift from one of those things to another like that. And at some point I have a lucid moment, I move on, but yeah.
We've got time for one more question up front, Kelly.
I have another potentially interesting and maybe silly question. What's the weirdest thing you've seen in space? Like, I've heard reports that they just declassified a bunch of information. Have you seen any UFOs?
So I figured I would see something, that just something odd up there. But I think the one time I was out there working, I see on the limb of the Earth this glowing orange horn-shaped thing. And I'm going, what in the world is that? Because I mean, the distance has got to be just huge. I'm looking at it, across at least 3,000 miles of Earth to see this thing, and it's big. I'm like, what in the world is that thing out there? And when I finally realized, like less than a minute later, it was a rising crescent moon. And the Earth's diffraction had sent this really distorted looking version of the moon around there, but it stopped my heart for a few minutes. What is this thing? But beyond that, I was told that the strangest things I saw in space were my own crewmates. I really didn't see anything beyond that. I did see another satellite, which is, I didn't realize at the time, was very odd. It's very rare. Usually even in space, with as dense as that low Earth orbit is, you use it across other satellites. And 2.5 hours into my first mission, we crossed paths, and I think we missed by maybe a half a mile another satellite that had been up 30 years before us, and it was still up there going around. So those are the two strangest things I saw, was a satellite and a rising moon. Yes, sounds pretty boring, I guess.
Well, Alvin, I appreciate you spending the time with us. Because we have a vast array of our demographics, we've got interns and students, professors coming in. I think our youngest is 9 years old, with CJ back there. Is there words of wisdom that you wouldn't mind leaving us with today that we can take with us tomorrow to make sure that we are leaving our next generation with some insight and words of wisdom?
Just to go back, a couple of different things out there. One, I think I hinted at before, you folks, is that there's, you do come back with a strong sense of the connectedness of things out there. Maybe it's seeing the Earth at night, seeing kind of this web of lights that connect different cities out there, or just seeing everybody, together all in one big rock and one little thin wisp of air. It's like, and just that whole piece out there, and you don't. It comes and goes. I mean, you feel that connectedness until somebody, at least I do, until somebody cuts me off in traffic, and then I don't feel very connected to them at that moment. But that does come in some of the quieter moments. And as I've told these folks, and I've told anybody who's coming up, is that if you're feeling something in your gut that's pulling you in a certain direction, I would say don't ignore it. Go out there and at least investigate it and see where that might lead. I had lots of well-meaning, well-intentioned advice to not do the things I did, and to not go flying because that's dangerous, not go into the Air Force because that's dangerous, not to go and be a test pilot or go into helicopters or go into the astronaut training. These things were all things that were fraught with failure, but I had that I just was unable to ignore the visceral pull to go do those things. And people say, was there a logical reason that I did these things? No, it was just a sense that, hey, that was just something in my gut that said, you want to or need to go do this. And it's like being hungry or sleepy. I just couldn't ignore it. I couldn't resist it. I just kept I wouldn't say it's a path of least resistance through life, but I'm no longer, I think least resistance is an oversold concept. Life has ways to make things difficult for you no matter which path you take. Might as well pick a path that you enjoy being on. That would be the only thing I'd leave you with on that.
Well, thank you very much. I appreciate your time. I'm sure everybody here does as well.